I mean, maybe I should just tell them before the game, hey, I like these people. I don't like these people. Um, I think that's what we'll do moving forward.
Hello and welcome to the Fast Break pregame show. My name is Aman Kidwai, manager of the UConn blog and the Fast Break newsletter, and I'm joined by our basketball writer, Patrick Martin. This is the final preview show of the regular season, and what a gem it has been. The Huskies are the regular season champions. They've tied the record for regular season wins in league play. They just swept the team that was the preseason favorite to pick the league. We'll talk about that as well as preseason expectations in this episode. This show is a production of the Fast Break newsletter. We've got a bunch of writers and photo video podcast makers going deep on UConn men's basketball, featuring in-depth reporting and analysis of the team, as well as some really detailed stuff on the program's history. This show is also a production of 22 Threads, purveyors of fine t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and other gear inspired by the Connecticut culture and lifestyle. They just launched a new line of Hassan Diarra gear that you guys should all go check out. That's 22threads.com. All right, the Huskies beat up on Seton Hall in their home finale and then traveled to Marquette, where they won by 7 in a game that was not as close as that score might suggest. Alex Karaban dropped 23, while Cam Spencer had 17 points and one technical foul. Patrick, what did you think about the Marquette game?
Listen, I've had people coming up to me in the streets, tears in their eyes, saying, "Patrick from the Fast Break, is Alex Karaban ever going to hit more than 2 threes in a game against somebody not named DePaul or Georgetown?" And I just kept having to say, like, hark, to quote the Carpenter, it's coming. Shooters shoot, and there's no one I trust more to get in the lab and figure out a shooting slump than Alex Karaban. I'm going to do my best Boston accent here, but he's a worker. And I'm happy to report that tales of his demise are greatly over exaggerated. He went 5 of 9 from 3 with some just deep, deep daggers. Every time Marquette was starting to get a little feisty and the crowd was getting back into it, Karaban or Cam Spencer, had some insane outside shot. Plus the usual smart heady play that he always provides with the cutting in this offense, the constant screening. He had 4 offensive rebounds. It was great to see him get untracked. Spencer and Karaban combined to go 10 for 16. Newton had all 10 of his points in the first half. That really helped, keep Marquette at arm's length. So while it was a rough-ish ending with a lot of those turnovers, you kind of just didn't really run a lot of sets to wind the game down. Not many teams throw havoc out there like that, like the way Shaka Smart can. And that's going to be now worked on in practices and hammered home to, close games, make sure, you don't leave that door ajar. So overall, yeah, absolutely thrilled and ready to talk some Cam Spencer stats if you're ready, Aman.
Absolutely, yeah. I think just first of all, I agree though that you don't really take much away from UConn because Tyler Kolek wasn't playing. Like you said, clearly a good Marquette side and a challenging team nevertheless. I don't know if Kolek would have made the difference in this game. Yes, it was a 7-point final margin. UConn was up really double digits most of the way there. Of course, yeah, great to see Karaban get back. He hit not only, a good amount of threes, but some real tight windows, some contested threes. And that's something that Hurley has said both he and Spencer need to work on if they're going to be more effective against those better defensive teams. And Marquette is one of those. What I ended up really leaving most impressed with as it relates to UConn after the Marquette game and the Seton Hall 30-point whopper that they put on him is just the consistency and composure of this team. They do it against everyone. They go through any challenge. When you think about this Marquette game, Marquette really did fight back admirably multiple times in waves, trying to make this a game. They got it as close as 5, 2 separate times in the second half. You do have to give them a lot of credit for that. Cam Jones, Oso Ighodaro, really, really great players. And again, just a really great team in general. And UConn held it off. UConn did not act like a team that has not been challenged much these last few months and really took care of business in that game. Any road win is tough. Doing it by a lot, doing it kind of comfortably. I'm so impressed by that. And then just the fact that I think really the defense is so good that it has UConn in any game. They can make enough stops until UConn's shots start falling, and that to me is really the formula there. In terms of a formula to beat UConn, like you said, there's this kind of havoc thing going, and maybe some teams are encouraged by the way Marquette came back late in that game, but I don't think so. I think UConn has too much to contest with, and the Marquette game was a really good example of that.
Overall, you have to feel comfortable with the fact that with Donovan Clingan out there, your other four players usually are triple threats. And they can usually they're dribble, pass, or shoot. So I think I haven't. Marquette seemed to be. I've watched a decent amount, and they seemed like I haven't seen a ton of havoc from them because they really haven't been in that situation before where they needed to speed the game up and get some easy baskets because they're a really good team. They're a top 10 team. Usually they're winning these games. So again, I think that's something that the coaching staff now recognizes and said, okay, we could get pressed a little bit. How do we handle it? Do you throw Steph Castle into the middle and have him be your pivot point? Alex Karaban is an excellent passer. He had a couple of turnovers yesterday, but overall, they all know what they're doing. That I trust the coaching staff to figure things out, and it wasn't something that completely boggled them down. They took their foot off the gas a little bit. That's to be expected.
Yeah, I think that's natural, and again, something that UConn can definitely power through either way. You had some Cam Spencer stats you wanted to run down. I think, we've talked about how good he's doing, how his assimilation onto the team has been so key to UConn's success this year. But again, he's really exceeding expectations on filling the spot and doing well, and he's even now exceeding on that. I think we're really having to talk about, again, Big East honors for Cam Spencer here. What are your thoughts on his season thus far and where it's going?
I saw on Twitter that he is on pace to be the first player in D1 history to shoot 50, 40, 90. So that's 50 from the field, 40 from three, 90 from free throw, as well as posting a 3-to-1 assist turnover ratio in a single season. He is now the number one player in offensive rating. All doing this on a team that, like you said, has championship aspirations. He's not stat padding. He's not hunting for his shots. He's fitting all of this within the offense, probably setting the second or third most amount of screens. If you watch the buildup on all these sets, it's Karaban and Spencer that are setting all the screens because they're so intuitive players that they can read when someone is overplaying, slip it, or back screen. And to have those two guys just running around, which to some people looks like they're running around like chickens with their heads cut off, but they have intent with every movement that they make, and it's so insane that that Spencer has essentially played himself into a second round, possibly draft pick from a guy that was coming in as oh yeah, he'll be pretty good. He can shoot decently. He can fill up some of Jordan Hawkins' production. There's arguments now circulating that he is having a better statistical output than Jordan Hawkins from last year. And Jordan Hawkins was a lottery pick. It's absolutely absurd what he's doing. And then to have the culture fit. And I know Hurley was upset about the technical to the media. And I think you have to do that to kind of reel him in because it really did give Marquette a chance. It did kind of squander their momentum. Was it a technical that should have been called? That's neither here nor there. But if I'm a betting man, I would say Hurley probably in closed doors with no recording devices present was probably just quietly just daps him up and been like, yeah, I love that.
It's a classy program. It's a championship program. Cam shouldn't be yelling shit at their bench. And he yelled it too early, too. And then he caught karma on the back end because then he had wide open looks and he missed them. So I didn't like that. I've liked some of the other fan bases that he's I met without these people. I mean, maybe I should just tell them before the game, hey, I like these people, I don't like these people. I think that's what we'll do moving forward.
Something we have to discuss here. UConn's having such a great season, right? They've tied the record for wins in Big East play with 17. That's crazy. They have multiple players that are going to be NBA draft picks, multiple players that are going to be on the All Big East team. They might have the Big East Player of the Year. They will have the Big East Freshman of the Year. They're going to be a 1 seed going into the NCAA tournament. Really, the only thing that could take down these immensely positive vibes right now, Patrick, would be an early postseason exit. And that's kind of something we've discussed a little bit on the Fast Break podcast as well, is expectations now have gone through the roof for this team. So how are you thinking about, just not even for the team, because honestly, I'm pretty confident in how the team manages expectations, but just for the fan base, really, how are you feeling about the management of expectations as they go into the Big East tournament, as well as an NCAA tournament where they'll be expecting everything?
I've got some, harsh truths, I think, for people trying to manage their expectations. UConn, as you have just said, and I've got some stats to back that up, UConn has played themselves into a zero-sum postseason. And what I mean by that is anything less than a Big East tournament championship and a Final Four appearance is a disappointment. And I would even go as far as saying that a national title in a Big East championship is a disappointment. I know that, there's a lot of history working against them, but let me just rattle off some of these overall statistics. UConn is allowing only roughly 62 points per game since Klingon returned to the lineup in January, and they're averaging roughly 80 points per game during that time span. So that's a 19-point margin. They are the only team that is a top 25 offense with a top 25 offensive and defensive rating versus quad one opponents. Very important in March. They have the only team with a top 5 offense and top 15 defense on Ken Palm. In their combined adjusted efficiency in the last 10 games is the best in the country. There is no alternative if you have been this dominant and if the losses have been easily explainable. And by explainable, I don't mean excuses at all. But when you look at Kansas, no Steph Castle, we now see what he brings to the table, plus a hobbled Cam Spencer. That was still a front rim 3 from winning that game. Seton Hall lose Donovan Klingon in the second half, plus a Steph Castle that was still working his way back from the injury. You really have to point to how Castle helped solve the Kadari Richmond Rubik's Cube and not really be concerned about them going forward. And then the Creighton loss, a team that went absolutely nuclear on the road with a schematic matchup that is probably UConn's only real weakness as far as a 7-2 rim protector and a bunch of shooters around him. Sound familiar? It's you always fear what you are the most. Because of that, it's 2 titles or bust to me for the fan base. And that's insane, but I honestly think that if they fall short of those 2 things, it will be looked at as an incredibly as a historic 2-year run, but within this one season in a vacuum, it would be a disappointment.
Right. It would be a missed opportunity for sure, especially just kind of given how the Big East has shaken out. I will go a little bit more modest than you just on the Big East tournament piece. I think for that, it's make it to the championship game. Don't bow out in the semifinals as you have 3 years in a row. Make it to the championship game, since you have not yet done that since joining the league in 2020. And I will just say, obviously I expect UConn to win the Big East tournament, but I will say, if they lose that, I don't think fans leave that day disappointed, because I think they still have that top prize in their eyes. And I still think they would have every reason to be confident in this UConn team in the NCAA tournament. But then, yeah, I mean, once it gets to the NCAA tournament, to me, it's Final Four or bust. You really can't, especially if you're going to be playing in Brooklyn for the first two games and then Boston for the next two games. That's the kind of stuff that UConn fans have complained about forever, is kind of getting de facto road games in that situation. UConn's now getting that for the whole ride through until potentially Phoenix for the Final Four. And I think that's something that UConn really has to take advantage of here. But the thing that is giving me the most confidence more than any, the path or anything, is just how good and dominant this team is, the way they keep their composure. It would have to take a Creighton and Omaha type of performance for somebody to beat UConn, I think, in the Big East tournament. And then it would have to take something like that plus foul trouble in the NCAA tournament. I want to just remind you, Dan Hurley repeatedly insists that his team is better in the NCAA tournament because it's not Big East refs, it's not Big East play, it's not as grindy, it's not as physical, and that benefits folks like Donovan Clingan, Alex Karaban, Samson Johnson. It really benefits everyone on this team that's able to run a wide open, sophisticated offense. So I just feel like they really are going to tear through the NCAA tournament field. I have tons and tons of confidence. I will only hold back just because they don't need a Big East tournament championship to kind of boost their resume or anything. They don't need it to they don't need it to get a championship, right? They already have a Big East regular season crown, which is a very hard thing to earn. And I think, yeah, like if they lose early, that would be bad in the Big East tournament. Still something that they can overcome. And if they were to lose in the championship game, just to give them like a small amount of space here, I think fans would not be the most disappointed in that because of having their eyes on the prize for the NCAA.
I'm going to push back on that. And this leads to our next segment, which is perfect. But because UConn won the regular season and is the number one seed and thus has to avoid the other two very good teams in the semifinal, making the final should be a presumption at this point. And the fact that UConn has not been swept by any Big East team, to me, thinks that they should, whoever it is, Creighton or Marquette or some dark horse, they should beat. I think if you lose the Big East tournament, that would be a massive disappointment because honestly, I'm starting to form the narrative, and we can pivot this into who scares me in the Big East tournament. Outside of Creighton and Marquette, the short answer is nobody. I'm developing a fear that the middle portion of the Big East is not that great this year. And I think that's going to show in postseason performance in March for anyone that does make the tournament. I hope I'm wrong because then that would potentially weaken UConn's case and could result in some tighter than expected games. But let's run through some of the teams here. St. John's everyone's all on Rick Pitino right now. They're back. No, they're not. They caught an emotionally hungover Creighton that had just beaten UConn and then had to travel cross country to Madison Square Garden. And since then, they have feasted on cupcakes. They will be very tough in their home environment, but you have to trust the way that UConn has beaten them once without Donovan Clingan and then another time without Alex Karaban. Xavier, I think their head coach is too busy looking up Short North property. Butler could be funky. However, I would trust the MSG crowd to really kind of will UConn forward if there was any upset bid in the making there. We talked about how I think UConn has solved Seton Hall with Steph Castle's point of attack defense. Marquette, with the way UConn crashes the offensive boards, that is a great stylistic matchup. Bring that on for a 3-game sweep if they are able to get by Creighton. And that leads me to the last biggest scare, which is Creighton. They have the size inside. They have the shot making across the roster. They have the defense. Their really only knock is their depth. But they're college kids. There are plenty of examples of teams running with 6-man rotations deep into the tournament. So in that sense, Creighton is the only team that really scares me. And we still saw how UConn handled them at home when Donovan Clingan was on a minutes restriction. I will be rooting for Marquette because I think that would be an easier path. But at the same time, no one in the Big East scares me. And that's not to say all these teams are terrible. I just think that the physicality of the league, everybody beats each other up, and there's beyond UConn, no one has really risen above that.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I would agree that I think Marquette or Creighton could do it, and might be playing for a little bit more. You could even see if like it was a Villanova playing for its postseason livelihood, a chance to make it, just playing for a little bit more. If there was a meeting in the Big East tournament final, but meeting that UConn has coming up this Saturday is at Providence in the regular season finale. That's another team we've got to talk about. They are also maybe a bubble team. Patrick, how are you feeling about this matchup at Providence on Saturday?
Well, if it's truly exorcism season, UConn got its first road dub, beat a ranked team on the road. I think it would be nice to get a road dub in Providence for the first time since 2012 and 2013. Beyond that, the implications are just beating a rival. It's Providence, guys. Like you want to beat Providence, especially as the last game of the year. Trust that Hurley is going to have the team amped up for that and finishing strong heading into the Big East tournament. Matchup wise, and as far as keys to the game, I'm really excited to watch, especially since there's no real implications. Steph Castle versus Devin Carter. The two were matched up, and Carter had some problems with him in the first game until foul trouble kind of loosened him up a little bit. And that leads into like my second key, which is want to see Donovan Clingan continue to stay composed. I don't think he picked up his second foul, I believe. No, he only had one foul in the entire Marquette game. That's incredibly impressive. Want to see that trend continued. Say what you will about the dunk or Providence's road environment. There are some friendly whistles that could occur. And can UConn stay composed and adjust? We saw a little small ball when Clingan sat for rest, and then Samson Johnson picked up some foul trouble. But staying composed and not fouling would be another key. And then last but not least is some depth building. Jalen Stewart yesterday played his most minutes versus a non-DePaul team since January 28th at Xavier, or home against Xavier. We'll continue to see him do well. His outside shot hasn't really been there yet, but he's making a lot of hustle plays. He's grabbing rebounds. That was a great block that he had yesterday. It shows his potential. All he needs is a couple of splash plays to have some confidence, and I think Hurley feels comfortable throwing him out there. Same with Solo Ball, who has done nothing wrong seeing his minutes drop off. Hassan Diarra has just been playing out of his mind. And what you want to see from Solo is maybe knock down a few threes, beat up on the 16 seed or in the quarterfinals of the Big East tournament, get him confident, because you have a little Naheem Aline light there with the lefty 3-and-D guy off the bench that could be a weapon that UConn might have to go to. And then as far as the last depth piece I want to talk about is Samson Johnson. And people forget, I think, that this is his first real action of his career. He may be a junior, but he's still incredibly raw. And he wasn't at his best against Marquette, but I really think he's so coachable and so athletic and reliant on his gifts that you can work with him on some of his smaller miscues and they get ironed out very quickly. I don't see him as a guy who just continually bobbles passes or misses assignments. He was pulled real quick after he missed that lob dump, and then he came in the next shift and was excellent. Continue to get those three guys' confidence up so that when it's a grind in the Big East tournament, in the NCAA tournament. I saw some stat that UConn had achieved its like highest margin of victory when there was more than 4 days of rest. Well, that ain't coming for a while. It's going to be rest, game in the NCAA tournament, and having depth pieces that are confident in chomping at the bit to get out there and contribute is only going to make UConn even more dangerous.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point about the depth guys. It's something that Hurley has said. He wants a larger rotation. He wants more guys involved. We saw him starting to try that in this Marquette game. I mean, I think the minutes that Jalen Stewart was getting were indicative of, really trying to get him in for some meaningful minutes there. And I think, yeah, that's what we can expect to see here in this Providence game. It's really kind of a key to the game for UConn is take care of business such that your depth guys can play in there and comfortably, and we don't have to have Donovan Clingan in the game with 7 minutes left in the season finale that ultimately is not so meaningful. So I think that's going to be really important, like you said, for Samson Johnson to have a good game, be able to stay on the court, be able to make an impact, and also for guys like Jalen Stewart and Solo Ball to get their act together. I think UConn is going to look to those guys early in the Big East tournament, and like you said, early in the NCAA tournament to be able to make sure that guys are rested, make sure that guys who are dinged up can stay off their ailing feet or hands or whatever it may be. As it relates to the matchup with Providence and winning, I mean, I think we've seen it all year. For UConn, it's about taking care of your own stuff, rebounding, playing really good defense, executing the offensive game plan and letting it take care of itself. If that goes to plan, I think we'll get a chance to see what Solo Ball and Jalen Stewart and Samson Johnson can do. And I think this game is a good opportunity for them to do that. So I love that point there. And I think even predicting maybe a Samson Johnson game here could be a fun idea because it is something that UConn needs.
I think obviously, Jay Stu and Solo, having those guys confident and feeling like they could help us, down the stretch here, postseason. It's obviously, something that, we've talked about and wanted to get those guys more minutes and, more opportunity. And I think they practice well. And we're not going to do anything that's going to obviously hurt our chances of winning the next possession. But also too, getting to 8, getting to 9 down the stretch here with 3, with potentially, if you win the Big East tournament, 3 games in 3 days. I mean, you'd love to go, play more. We'd love to be playing deeper than we are right now. I guess we'll see.